year. If I don't meet the iconic man himself, Simon Kenton.
Hey, Peter.
Now, a lot of people may mistake him for Simeon England.
Maybe.
But today, you're Simon Kenton.
Yes, sir.
You're going to do a presentation for us?
Yes, Simon Kenton's life. He's a man on his own hook, and I hope to bring out the most important parts of his life.
And this is going to be first person?
Yes, sir.
So we're actually going to see Simon Kenton.
Yes, hopefully.
You need days to cover the whole story, but...
The hard part was squelching it down into what I was going to share in less than an hour.
Well, sir, I look forward to it. I'm going to go up there and get a front row seat and
appreciate you.
Really get to know Simon Kenton today.
Okie doke.
Take care.
Thank you. Mr. Chambers here would love to interview me for some reason. I do not know why. I'm just a common man. I live and work on the frontier, and you all are here to sit through that process.
Let us start at the beginning. Tell me about your childhood.
Oh, my dad is a simple man. I'm the son of an Irish farmer, and primarily our crop was tobacco. And tobacco, raised properly 1 year, could provide our family with enough groceries and material and clothing for the entire year. And you might wonder, we don't, one of the Englishmen said of the Virginians, that the Virginians are content to live but day to day. We don't have a lot, but we don't need a lot. And so the land that we lived on, that I grew up on, we didn't own it. My father rented it. And so we were poor, you would say, but we were doing just fine, and we were happy. I had a good childhood. My parents were good to me. I'm the seventh child, I believe. I'm the seventh child, and there's two more behind me.
And you had said an Irish farmer, correct?
Yes, son of an Irish farmer.
What is your aversion to work that drove you to the frontier?
I hated to work. I still do. My dad, he'd put me to work splitting, those fence rails. And I'd do just as many as I could while he was still there. And then when he left, so would I. And guess where I'd go? I'd go to the woods. There is no excitement in work. There's no danger in work. If I'm farming, I know exactly what I'm going to do the next day. What kind of excitement is that? So I don't prefer work. I don't prefer the kind of work where another man pays you.
Oh.
Yeah.
Now, with work, how did you get your provisions for the profession you have now?
Oh, well, I had to work. Yeah. Yeah, I had to work, and that is quite a contradiction, but sooner or later you do have to, buck up and maybe plow a few rows or split a few fence rails.
Understandable.
Yeah.
Understandable. All right. Now, with who you are today, where did you learn to fight like this?
Oh, well, let's see. That's a good question. Well, I can tell you one of the fights that I had that was in my childhood that goes back to that first question you had is there was a fella in my town, it wasn't much of a town, and he fell in love with the same girl that I was in love with. And I didn't particularly care for that. I don't think she even knew that I loved her or was sweet on her at all, but I sure did. And I found out, I wasn't but 14 or 15 years old, but I found out that a fellow named Willie Leachman, he fell in love with her too. And then I found out they was to be married. Well, I didn't like that too much. That meant I wasn't winning. And I don't like to lose. And so I waited to the wedding because I didn't have enough nerve, but I went to that wedding. And I pulled old Willie Leachman out of there and I said, hey, you love the girl that I'm supposed to be marrying. We need to settle a score. And you know what we done? we started thrashing around and fighting and wrestling and tussling, and it was going great. For Willie. He was beating the stew out of me. I mean, I couldn't do nothing to get ahead. You know why? I'll tell you later. But that embarrassed me. Can you imagine in front of the people that you've grown up with, going to a wedding and saying this is the last chance to get the girl before she gets married, and somebody beating the stew out of you? I don't like to lose. I like to win. And so that's a little bit of the fighting that I learned.
Now, I believe you were at Fort Pitt, correct?
I was at Fort Pitt, yes.
You fell in with some friends there? Tell us about them.
I sure did. Well, I need to tell you how I got to Fort Pitt. Let me tell you that.
Start there, then.
We need to go back to Willie Leachman. Okay, you got enough space to write?
I do.
Okay.
I do.
Willie Leachman. So I went to work. That's what I was telling you, you know. I went to work. When I got home from getting the stew beat out of me at that wedding, you know what my dad told me? He said, son, you're not strong enough because you don't work an honest day in your life. So that drove me. You know what drove me? I don't like to lose. I like to win. So I went to work and I got strong. My daddy sent me for the saw, and you remember me telling you that we were poor, right?
Yes, yes.
So
Got that on my other paper.
each family didn't own their own saw. We had a communal saw. And there might be 4 or 5 families that would get together and buy a saw. And so my dad sent me after the saw that the Leachmans had. Well, guess what? I'd been working and I got strong enough. I was feeling pretty spiffy. And I thought, now's the time. And I went over and knocked on the door, and Mr. Leachman said, all right. He sent Willie with me to go get the saw. Well, we went into the woods where the saw was, and I thought, now's my chance. And I said, Willie, we need to settle this score. And so again, we went to thrashing and beating and punching and pulling and all that. And it was going great for Willie. He was beating the stew out of me again. Only this time nobody was around. But I tell you what, he had me beat down like this, and he was beating on the top of my back, because you fight until somebody gives up. That's what you do. You just fight until somebody hollers. Well, I looked over and I saw just about where Mr. Hawkins is standing, I saw a sapling, something like a bush. And I thought, if I could just get over there. So I started to push, and I'd push, and he'd roll back a little bit, and I'd push, and I finally got him over there. He's still beating on me. And I got his long hair wrapped up around in that bush. And then it started going good for Simon Kenton. And I started beating the stew out of him. And I kept on going until I finally realized I'd been at this a little while and he couldn't get loose. And so I stopped. And he was just hunkered down there. He wouldn't move. So I tried to shake him and wake him, and he didn't wake or shake. And I sat there a minute, I did it again. And he didn't move. So I sat down on a tree a little bit to rest from all of that tussle. And I went back after a few little moments there, and I done it again. I shook him again, and he did not move. I had killed Willie Leachman. Well, you know what that means. They don't like to feed prisoners in jail. They're going to hang you for killing somebody.
What'd you do?
Well, my dad sent me after that saw, and the only thing I had was the clothes on my back. I didn't have a knife, I didn't have a gun, nothing. And I took off for the frontier.
Is this where you managed to get to Pitt?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Days and days. And what would happen is I would run to a cabin, and I'd ask them for food, and they might give me a little bit. Sometimes they're afraid of me because I look dirty, and, you know. Sometimes they'd just give me a little bit of food. And then I go to the next cabin. And one guy, I stayed there for a night or two, and he'd give me a hat for the work that I'd done. And I would take on the name, I'd ask them, what's the name of the next cabin? And they'd tell me. Let's say it was Smith. So I would go to the next cabin and take on their last name, so they thought I was a relative. And then I'd stay there for a couple of days. Well, that finally happened until I met a family at a cabin that their name was Butler. And I told him that I was Simon Butler. And I stayed there long enough, and he thought I was a long lost relative. Mm-hmm. I worked until I got some clothes and my gun, my weapons, and then I left for Fort Pitt.
Okay. And I believe you fell in with a group at Pitt?
I did.
Tell me about them.
Yeah. Yeager and Strader. Stroder? One of the two, but what's that?
With an A.
Yes. Yeah. Yeager was an older gentleman. I don't know how old he was, but he was not able to run around on the frontier like we were. But Strader was my age, and what we had worked out was that Yeager had heard about this place called Kentucky, and you should have heard about that place. Now, I've heard preaching at home in my day, but they say where the land and milk and honey flows, that's what he described Kentucky as. Cane land as far as you can see, big game everywhere, buffalo. You could just taste that buffalo tongue when he'd describe it. It was amazing. And so he had been captured as a child and raised by the Indians, adopted and raised by the Indians. So he knew how they fought. He knew where they hunted. He knew all. He said he even saw them ambush a group of people one time. He knew how the Indians lived. He could speak 4 or 5 of their languages. He's a smart fellow. So between Yeager and Strader, we decided that Yeager would be the camp tender. We would hunt, the 2 young guys would hunt, we'd bring the animals back, and he would skin them and butcher them and tend the camp, get the firewood, and he would cook. So it was a really good deal. So Fort Pitt is where we started, and we started to head south down the river. He said it was only a few days' trip on canoe. It was far more than 2 days' trip. It took weeks, and we still didn't hardly get to where he thought we ought to be. But we would pass several Indian towns, and we would port and go in and have a meal with them and dance with them, come back out, go back on down the river. Everything seemed fine for a while. But what we did was we hunted and trapped for a whole year, over a year, at one camp.
Impressive.
Yeah. Am I talking too much?
No, perfect. Now, what happened that concluded that?
Okay. Well, that's a sad thing. Strader and I had been out, it was raining, and we were wet. And so we stripped everything down at nighttime. There was a fire going, and Yeager was standing, let's see, we were setting, he was standing about right there where the first row is standing. And I'm sitting here with nothing but my shirt on, same way with Strader. And one of the fire lickings went up and lit up, and I saw eyeballs behind Yeager in the dark. Strader did too. I tapped him. I said, let's go. We took off running. We could run like deer. We knew Yeager couldn't. He was slow. And as we were running, just our shirts on, we heard Yeager turn around and start talking to them in their tongue. Then we heard a gunshot. We knew he was dead. We spent 5 days with only a shirt on, sometimes wet, sometimes cold, sometimes both, without any food, before we found a cabin that fed us. That's sort of how I learned how to fight there too. Yeager taught us a lot with noting the Indian mannerisms and how they fought and the ambush points.
To kind of change route here, I've heard that you actually don't like to hunt.
I hate to hunt. I know that sounds sort of like the work thing, but yeah. But I don't like to hunt unless it's dangerous or there's extreme need. I have to wait till he gets done writing.
When would you consider it dangerous to hunt
Oh,
during your life?
when would I consider it dangerous to hunt is the question. And the
The
answer,
only way you like to do it.
that's right. The answer is the year 1777. By the way, the year that we're in right now is 1785. 1777 is called the Bloody Sevens because there's, you help me out with counting? 3? There's 3 sevens in it. So I didn't go to school but half a day. I can only write my name. 3 sevens, is that right, Mr. Chambers?
I believe so.
Okay. The year 1777, the Indians let out a very vicious attack on the frontier and the forts. And of all the forts in Kentucky, the only 2 that were still active was Boonesboro and Harrod. Logan Station was abandoned. All the other stations and forts had either gone back to Pennsylvania or Virginia through the Gap, or were holed up inside these 2 forts. And you know what kind of pressure that puts on someone like me is now the fight is always, it's 100%. We're always fighting, but the hunting became more dangerous. Anybody in the fort could be called to fight, but nobody wanted to go out to hunt. So I became the hunter. And here's how I hunted. I would leave at night in the dark and go out about 2 to 3 miles past the Indian camps. Can you imagine walking along at night and seeing 2 fires, one on either side of you, and one little limb that you break with your foot could get you killed because it'd wake them up. Killed, or even worse, killed slow. I don't particularly like to burn at the stake, but what that did is it got my heart pounding. That's fun. That's excitement. So, when was it dangerous to hunt? I'd leave. I'd get to, at night, pitch black, I'd get to a tree, and I would dig a hole about the size of a man's head, and I'd put a bunch of white oak bark in it and light it on fire. I'd cover it up with dirt and punch 2 holes in it, just like the collier does to make charcoal. It's the same thing. And I would wrap myself up in the blanket over my head, over that fire, leaning up against a tree, and that's how I'd sleep at night. Next morning, I'd get up and hunt. I'd hunt me a deer, I'd shoot it, and immediately, once I saw where it landed or stopped, I'd drop, and I might stay there for an hour, because I'm waiting for somebody to come from any direction to that noise, to that gunshot. And when I got up, I felt it was safe. I'd quarter that deer. I'd wrap it up in the skin, and then put it in a spot. I might do 6 deer in one day like that, and make 3 trips into the fort the next night with those bundles of deer skin quartered, with the meat quartered in there. That's how the fort would survive.
Now, tell us about your profession now.
Oh, well, I'm a guide, and I'm a scout, and I'm a spy.
What would you say your duties are as a spy?
Let's say that neighbor friend here has his horses stolen by the Indians. A spy would go unsteal those horses.
Little subjects.
Doing something very similar to the hunting is leaving at night and going and reclaiming those. If neighbor friends, maybe half the family was killed, and they took maybe someone, maybe the children, I'd try to go get them back too.
Tell me about Logan Station.
Oh, Logan Station was, I love to visit Logan Station. Daniel Tribune was there. Daniel Tribune's a fine young man. Logan Station was one of the first 3 forts. It was Harrod, Boone, and Logan Station in Kentucky is the first ones. So it was a place that I visited quite often.
Now, you were a captive for some time, correct?
Yes, I figured you would ask me about that. Back to Daniel Tribune, we had, and the horses. The Indians stole a lot of horses from our area. And as a spy, you know what's exciting to do? Is to go unsteal those horses. So I wanted to go up to Chillicothe to the Indian town and get those horses back. And I asked Daniel Tribune to come with me. Well, he agreed to that night, but his brother got back and convinced him that his mom wouldn't like him going on that dangerous of an expedition, so he talked him out of it. But I tell you what happened. There was 3 of us, me and 2 other fellas, and we went to Chillicothe. We snuck into the camp, and we got horses back. But here's the problem. One of the horses whinnied. It woke up one of the natives. And so we were already on horses. We already had them tied to us, and we took off. We knew that they would chase us, but we knew it wouldn't be till the next morning. So we had a head start on them. And what happened was we got ahead of them and kept on riding until we got to the river. And a storm had come up, and it had been raining. And that river was up so high that the horses wouldn't swim across, and we were stuck. So we let the horses loose and went to a spot where we could see if they were coming, and we spent the day. And sure enough, here they come after us. They shot one of the fellas and scalped him. The other fella that we thought was a little tubby, we thought he was, we even told him, we joked with him, you're gonna be the first one that's killed because you can't run half as fast as us. He's the one that got away. And they caught me. I run through a cane break and come out, and there was mounted Indians on the other side ready, and so I turned around and went back in, and one of them Indians came up behind me, put his hands on my shoulder, and put his knee in my back. If he hadn't have done that, I could outrun the whole lot of them. So that's what happened. And that night was very uncomfortable. Yeah. Well, they tie you up to where you can't move. The second night was the same way. The third day, they tied me to a horse. They tied my feet underneath the horse. They tied my feet together, and they tied a rope around my neck and tied it to the horse's neck and behind. And then guess what they done? And that horse went running through the woods any which way he wanted to, going through the brush and the briars, cutting my legs, cutting everything, and I knew that I couldn't fall off. If I would, I'd get hung. I couldn't lean forward. I couldn't lean back. I'd get hung. And that little expedition, that cut me up quite bad. But we finally made it to a town. It's been several days. And in that town, some of the warriors take off in front of us. They start whooping, hollering, because they've got a captive. Someone who's been stealing their horses. They didn't tell everybody else's because they had stolen our horses. But that didn't matter to them. And what they make you run is something called a gauntlet. You familiar with a gauntlet?
I am.
Okay, for those of you who are not, it's 2 lines, and this first one seemed to be about 1/4 of a mile long. And you run through there, and people are trying to beat the stew out of you with sticks and clubs. I run that one twice because I didn't make it the first time, and the second time knocked me out. And I spent a night recovering. All in all, I went to the next town. They'd make me do the same thing. They were parading me from town to town. I'd run another gauntlet. One time, I got loose. I jumped over the top of them, took off running. And I would have outrun every last one of them had it not been the guy jumped on his horse, rode up beside me, and thunk, sunk his pipe tomahawk into my head. I had to recover from that one too. But 9 gauntlets in all. That's how many times I run one.
Why do you think they paraded you from time to time?
Oh, I was a trophy to them. He said, why do I think they paraded me? I was a trophy. Any spy or person that was willing and tough enough to sneak into their camp or their land and sneak back out, that's the one they wanted. That was a trophy. So they sentenced me to burn at the stake. 3 times. 3 times to burn at the stake.
With you standing here today, I see that didn't happen. So how did you get free?
I am still here. 3 times. One time this is what I say. One time I was saved by Simon Girty. One time I was saved by Chief Logan, and one time I was saved by God. Simon Girty, who is a renegade, he is a white that was raised by the Indians, and I was sentenced to burn. Simon Girty came in. He spoke for me because we had met at Fort Pitt. We were friends. He got me acquitted. I was free for that day. Then they sent me to the next town, run another few gauntlets, and I met Chief Logan, who I also knew. Chief Logan sent runners ahead of me, and I didn't know what for. But then then sentenced to burn? No. Chief Logan says, no, we need to wait. Do it at another town. So then I went to the next town, and that's when they lit the fires, and they were burning. There I am at the stake. They lit the fires, and it started to rain. That's the time I was saved by God.
Do you carry any scars from your captivity?
Yeah, besides some scratches and things like that, there's a soft spot in my head from that pipe tomahawk, but it's okay. It doesn't hurt much. I don't have to think much.
A man such as yourself with such adventures, what would you say keeps you going?
You know, I would say my 2 dogs, and here's why. I was hunting one day, one of those dangerous hunts, by myself. And those 2 dogs, we spotted a buffalo. And those 2 dogs are hunters. They're with me for a reason. And both of those dogs went on either side of that buffalo and grabbed its ears and hung on there until they both tumbled into the river. The river was frozen, so they were fighting. They broke through the ice, went under the ice, and all 3 animals were lost. Here's what keeps me going. Those dogs were extremely loyal to me. They would sleep beside me at night when I was by myself in the woods. Can you imagine being in the woods and not being able to sleep because you don't know who's coming to find you because you just got their captive back or you just got your horses back? Those 2 dogs never left me and died trying to do what I had trained them to do. That was the greatest loss of my life.
Well, as a man who ran away from himself, what made you take back your real name?
You just asked what made me take back my real name. As you know, I was known for Simon Butler on the frontier for years. And I tell you who made me take back my real name was Willie Leachman. You remember him?
Yes.
Yeah. I finally realized when I thought I had killed Willie Leachman and I run off into the frontier, Willie never died. So I got to take my real name back. Kind of rascally, ain't it? Make a fella be somebody else for years and years, never tell you about it.
That is all I have for you, sir.
That's all you have?
That's all I have for you.
Okay,
Thank you so much.
you're welcome.